Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a deep dive into Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins.
Yeah, this book is a classic for a reason.
It really is. So much incredible wisdom about personal transformation and really taking control of your life.
It's packed with practical strategies.
Okay, so one of the things that really struck me was the idea that our decisions, even the small ones, really shape our destiny.
It's powerful stuff.
Like Robbins' story about meeting O.J. Simpson as a kid and setting these huge goals for himself.
Right, even then he was already focused on making choices that would move him towards his vision.
Exactly, not just letting circumstances define his path.
It's about taking ownership.
So that's something
Right.
we can all apply.
Absolutely. It's not about waiting for the perfect moment or for someone to give us permission. It's about deciding right now.
Deciding what we want to change and taking that first step.
That's it.
But sometimes that first step can feel so overwhelming, you know?
Well, that's where understanding the role of pain and pleasure comes in.
Okay, how so?
Robbins explains how we're wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure right. And that drives so many of our decisions.
That's totally true. Like, I know hitting snooze every morning makes me late and stressed, but the pleasure of those extra few minutes in bed always wins.
Right, but what if you could shift that association?
What do you mean?
Like, what if you linked more pain to hitting snooze and more pleasure to getting up early?
I see what you're saying. Like, imagining the worst case scenario of being super late for a meeting versus picturing myself enjoying a quiet cup of coffee and a productive morning.
Exactly. You're hacking your own brain by consciously changing those associations.
I like that idea. Hacking our own brains.
And it applies to anything you want to change. Let's say you want to start exercising more regularly.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on the effort and discomfort, you focus on how good you'll feel afterwards or the long-term health benefits.
This is starting to feel a lot less overwhelming and more like I actually have some control over my habits.
That's the point. It's about understanding the mechanics of your own mind and then becoming the mechanic.
I like that analogy.
And speaking of things we can control, let's talk about the power of beliefs.
Well, that's a big one.
Right. Robbins argues that our beliefs, even if they're not based in reality, they can shape our experiences.
Kind of like the placebo effect, right?
Exactly. Like how just believing that something will work can actually have a real impact on our health.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Have you ever noticed that in your own life where your belief in something actually made a difference?
Absolutely. It's like when you're convinced you're coming down with a cold and then all of a sudden you start feeling those symptoms.
Oh, yeah, or the opposite.
Yeah.
When you believe a remedy will work and you actually start feeling better.
It's like our mind is creating our reality.
So how do we change those limiting beliefs that might be holding us back?
Well, Robbins talks about something called reference legs.
Reference legs, what are those?
They're basically the experiences, the information, even our imagination, all the things that support our beliefs.
Oh, okay, I see.
And he suggests that by seeking out new references, new experiences, we can challenge those old limiting beliefs and create new, more empowering ones.
So it's like expanding our worldview to make room for new possibilities.
Exactly. Imagine you've always believed you're not good at public speaking, maybe based on a few negative experiences in the past.
Right.
But what if you started seeking out new references, like joining a Toastmasters group or watching inspiring TED Talks?
Okay, yeah.
Those new experiences can start to change your belief and build your confidence.
I see what you mean. It's like we can rewrite our own stories by choosing what we expose ourselves to.
And that leads perfectly to the next concept, the power of state.
Our emotional state.
Yes, exactly. Robbins argues that our state influences our actions and perceptions in a big way.
Okay, but how much control do we really have over our state? I mean, sometimes I feel like my emotions just take over.
Of course, but Robbins suggests that we can learn to shift our state more intentionally through simple techniques like changing your posture, taking deep breaths, or even changing your internal dialogue. You know those things we were talking about earlier?
So it's like, instead of letting my emotions control me, I can learn to control my emotions.
You got it. It's not about denying our emotions, but rather understanding that we have the power to influence them.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. It feels like all these concepts are connected, and we're not just victims of our circumstances or emotions.
Right.
We actually have more power than we think to shape our own reality.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating concept from the book, The Magic of Questions.
The questions we ask ourselves. How does that tie into everything we've been talking about?
Well, think about it. The questions we ask ourselves all the time shape our focus and influence our emotions.
So it's about asking ourselves questions that empower us instead of disempowering us.
Right. For example, instead of asking, why am I so bad at this? You could ask, what can I learn from this experience?
I see the difference. One keeps you stuck, and the other helps you grow.
Exactly. And that's a huge part of what Awaken the Giant Within is all about. It's about becoming aware of those automatic thoughts and questioning whether they are serving you or holding you back.
So it's not just about positive thinking, but about asking ourselves the right questions to guide our thoughts and actions in a more positive direction.
Precisely.
This is giving me so much to think about. I'm starting to understand how all these concepts work together to create lasting change.
And we're just getting started. There's so much more to unpack in this book, from transforming your vocabulary to understanding the power of values.
Well, I can't wait to keep diving in. This is already such an insightful deep dive.
Me too. Let's continue exploring these tools for personal transformation.
Sounds great. Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we were talking about all those amazing tools Robbins gives us to shape our emotional states.
Like changing our posture or using our internal dialogue to shift our feelings.
Yeah. It's incredible how much power we have over our emotions when we understand how they work.
It's like we can become the masters of our own inner world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's more, right? What other strategies does Robbins offer for transforming our thinking?
Well, he dives into something he calls transformational vocabulary.
Transformational vocabulary.
It's the idea that even the words we use can impact how we feel and experience things.
Oh, that's interesting. I've heard about the power of positive self-talk. Is that kind of what he's talking about?
It's related, but Robbins takes it a step further. He says it's not just about using positive words, but about recognizing that some words carry a lot more emotional weight than others, you know?
Okay, I think I see what you mean. Like some words just hit harder emotionally than others.
Exactly. Like think about the word devastated versus disappointed.
Okay, yeah, devastated feels so much heavier emotionally.
Right, and Robbins suggests that we can actually choose words that are less emotionally charged to kind of soften the blow of negative experiences.
So it's about being mindful of the language we use and choosing words that empower us rather than drag us down.
Precisely. He calls these softeners, and they can really help us manage our emotional intensity. It's like choosing words that are more accurate and less likely to send you into a tailspin.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's such a simple shift, but I can see how it could make a big difference in how we experience things.
And speaking of shaping our experiences, Robbins also talks about the power of life metaphors.
Oh yeah, those are really fascinating.
Remember the story in the book about the man who used the metaphor of whiteout to calm his anxiety?
Yeah, that story blew my mind. It seemed almost like magic, how that simple mental image could shift his state so quickly.
It's pretty incredible how powerful metaphors can be. They tap into our emotions and create these strong associations that can either empower or limit us depending on the metaphors we choose.
Right, like instead of saying, I'm drowning in work, I could say, I'm navigating a challenging current.
Exactly. It's about finding metaphors that help us feel more resourceful and in control of our circumstances.
I like that. It's like we have this power to reframe our experiences just by changing the metaphors we use.
You got it. And that leads perfectly into the next concept. Decoding action signals.
Decoding action signals. Okay. I'm intrigued. What are those?
Think of them as those so-called negative emotions we all experience sometimes, like anger, frustration, sadness, you know?
Okay, yeah.
Robbins encourages us to see these not as negative, but as action signals, messages from our body and mind that something needs attention.
Interesting. So instead of getting stuck in those negative emotions, we can learn to see them as valuable information.
Exactly. It's like when the check engine light comes on in your car, you don't just ignore it, right? You take it as a signal that something needs to be looked at.
That's a great analogy.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed, for example, it could be a signal that you need to reevaluate your priorities or ask for help, maybe set some boundaries.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like those uncomfortable emotions are actually trying to guide us towards a better path.
Exactly. And once you understand the message, you can take action to address the underlying issue. So you're not just a victim of your emotions, but you can become the master of your own experience.
That's so empowering. Okay, so we've talked about changing our thoughts, our words, our metaphors, and even how we view our emotions. But to really take control of our lives, wouldn't we need to get clear on what truly matters to us, like what really motivates us at our core?
You're absolutely right. And that's where understanding our values comes in.
Values.
Robbins says that our values, those things that are most important to us, are what drive our decisions and shape our lives.
That makes sense. But how do we even know what our values are? I mean, sometimes it feels like they change or we're not even sure what we really value.
Well, Robbins actually provides some exercises in the book that can help you clarify your values. Like, really think about what's most important to you. What do you want your life to stand for?
So it's like taking inventory of what really matters and then using that as a guide to make choices that are more aligned with who we want to be.
Exactly. He calls it our values hierarchy because some values are more important to us than others, and those top values are the ones we really want to make sure our lives are reflecting.
This is making me think I might need to do some serious reflection on my own values. I'm not sure I've ever really sat down and thought about it in this way.
It's a really powerful exercise, and it can be so helpful in making decisions and creating a life that feels truly fulfilling.
Okay, I'm definitely adding that to my to-do list. But understanding our values is just one piece of the puzzle, right? What else do we need to consider to really create lasting change?
Well, Robbins also talks about the concept of rules.
Rules, like the rules of life.
Kind of. He's talking about those often unconscious beliefs that we have about when we deserve to experience pleasure or pain. They're often tied to our values, and they kind of act like this hidden code that runs our emotional responses.
Okay, that sounds a little complicated. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say one of your top values is achievement. You might have an unconscious rule that says, I only feel successful if I get a promotion every year.
Okay, I see.
That rule might push you to work hard, which is great, but it could also lead to disappointment and burnout if you don't get that promotion.
Right, because you've attached your sense of worth to that external outcome.
Exactly. And Robbins says we need to become aware of those rules and question whether they are really serving us.
So we need to identify those hidden rules and see if they're actually helping us or hurting us.
Exactly. And then, if they're not serving us, we can work on changing them. Remember, we have the power to change our beliefs.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense.
Okay.
It's like we have to get clear on our values, examine the rules that are driving our behavior, and then rewrite those rules to create a more positive and empowering experience for ourselves.
You got it. And that brings us to another powerful concept in the book, the importance of references.
References, like the people we look up to or the books we read.
It includes those, but Robbins goes even deeper. He says that all of our past experiences, both real and imagined, shape our beliefs and influence our decisions.
So basically, our past is constantly informing our present.
In a way, yes. But here's the exciting part. We can actively seek out new references to challenge those old beliefs and expand our possibilities.
That's a much more empowering way to look at it. So we're not just stuck with the beliefs we formed in the past.
Not at all. Remember the story about Deborah overcoming her fear of skydiving?
Oh yeah, the one where she completely changed her identity and faced her fear head on.
Exactly. She did it by exposing herself to new experiences and information that challenged her old beliefs about herself and about skydiving.
It's like she rewrote her story by choosing to focus on different references.
Exactly. And we can all do the same. It's about being proactive and shaping our own reality.
So we have the power to choose what we focus on and what we let influence our beliefs.
And that brings us to one of the most powerful forces in shaping our lives, our identity.
Okay, now we're getting to the deep stuff. What does Robbins say about identity?
He argues that our identity, who we believe we are at our core, shapes our actions, beliefs, and ultimately our destiny.
Wow. So it's not just about setting goals or changing our habits, it's about changing who we believe we are.
Exactly. He actually shares a pretty chilling example in the book about the Korean War POWs and how their captors used identity-shifting tactics to change their beliefs and actions.
That's a powerful illustration of how much our sense of self can influence us. But how do we go about changing our own identity? It seems like such a fundamental part of who we are.
It might seem that way, but Robbins believes we can consciously choose our identity. He suggests asking ourselves empowering questions about who we want to be and then taking actions that are consistent with that new identity.
So it's not enough to just think differently. We have to act differently as well.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with your desired identity. So if you want to be a healthy person, you start acting like a healthy person. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you start taking the actions of a successful entrepreneur.
This is starting to feel like a complete overhaul of how we approach personal growth. It's not just about surface level changes, it's about transforming ourselves from the inside out.
That's exactly what Awaken the Giant Within is all about. It's about becoming the best version of yourself and creating a life that is truly fulfilling. And there's one more crucial piece to this puzzle:
Okay, what's that?
mastering your time.
Oh boy, time management is definitely one of my biggest challenges. I always feel like there's not enough time in the day.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But Robbins reminds us that time is a mental construct, and we have more control over it than we think.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we become masters of our time instead of slaves to it?
Well, he talks about a lot of practical strategies like planning your day, setting clear boundaries, and eliminating distractions so you can really focus on what's most important to you.
Those all sound like great ideas.
Yeah.
I'm definitely guilty of letting distractions take over my day way too often.
It happens to the best of us. But the key is to be intentional with your time and make choices that align with your values and goals.
This is making me feel so much more empowered about my time. I'm ready to ditch the overwhelm and start owning my schedule.
That's the spirit. And you know, we've only just scratched the surface of what Awaken the Giant Within has to offer.
I know, right? There's so much wisdom in this book.
Are you ready for the final part of our deep dive?
Absolutely, let's do it. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Awaken the Giant Within, and I'm really excited about this last section.
Yeah, this is where Robbins challenges us to take all those amazing tools and use them to make a difference in the world.
I love that. It's like taking all this personal growth work and saying, okay, how can I use this to contribute to something bigger than myself?
Exactly. And he emphasizes that we all have the power to make a difference no matter how small our actions might seem.
Right, we don't have to wait for some grand opportunity or become like a superhero or anything.
It's more about finding a cause that we're passionate about and then committing to taking action.
Okay, so what's the first step? How do we even begin to make a difference?
Well, Robbins suggests starting by identifying something that really lights you up, something that resonates with your values.
So finding that sweet spot where our passions and skills meet.
Exactly. It could be anything from volunteering at a local charity to advocating for environmental protection, whatever speaks to your heart.
Yeah, I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by the thought of having to solve all the world's problems, but really it's about finding our own unique way to contribute.
Absolutely. And then it's about taking that first step, no matter how small it might seem. You know, maybe it's donating to a cause or spreading awareness about an issue or volunteering your time. It all adds up.
Right, and those small actions can often create a ripple effect, inspiring others to get involved too.
That's the beauty of it. It's like those small acts of kindness and generosity can actually create a chain reaction of positive change in the world.
This is making me think about how making a difference in the world can also be a powerful reference for ourselves.
What do you mean?
Well, like we were talking about earlier, references shape our beliefs. So when we take action to help others, it can actually shift our identity and reinforce our belief that we have the power to make a positive impact.
I love that perspective. It's like the more we give, the more we receive, not necessarily in a material sense, but in a sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Right, and that sense of purpose can then fuel our desire to do even more, creating this beautiful cycle of growth and contribution.
Exactly. It's like we tap into this endless source of energy and inspiration when we connect with something bigger than ourselves.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Awaken the Giant Within, what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
That's a tough one because there are so many gems of wisdom in this book, but if I had to choose just one, it would be this. You have the power to create the life you want and to make a positive impact on the world.
Beautifully said. It all starts with taking ownership of your thoughts, emotions, and actions, and then using those tools to create lasting change, both within yourself and in the world around you.
It's about awakening the giant within each of us.
That's a perfect way to put it. Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope our listeners feel inspired and empowered to take action.
Absolutely. And that concludes our deep dive into Awaken the Giant Within. We hope you enjoyed the journey. And remember, the power to create a more fulfilling life and a better world lies within each of us. Now go out there and awaken your giant.